All right. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to KUZALIWA 2022. I'm gonna, Baba and Mamu. I know Baba. You got your sound straight now. You are. Let me see. Okay, Baba and Mamu's gonna open us up.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, Baba.
Oh, greetings, family. On behalf of the United Black Community, we present our annual KUZALIWA celebration. And as most of us know, KUZALIWA, Kiswahili word meaning birthday. And we've been doing this on and off for at least since 1977, I believe, celebrating the life and times of our great brother, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, aka OMOWOLE, Malcolm X. And each month, the United Black Community put on different programs pertinent to the community, uplift of our community. Last month, we had a program on violence in the community. And today, we're celebrating the life and times of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. So we thank you for coming on board with us today. We have a very, very splendid program lined up for you this evening. So we turn it back over to Baba Kaleshi.
Yeah, bro. We'll call Baba Rasa to help us open up properly. We have to always invite our ancestors whenever we get together. Make sure that they're part of what we're doing. Baba Rasa Wills.
Barigani.
Joy Barigani.
Greetings, family. How is everyone this evening?
Great.
Let me open up by giving just a brief synopsis of what the United Black Community is all about. The United Black Community, or UBC, represents a coalition of community-based organizations and institutions established expressly for the purpose of collectively identifying and solving community issues and problems and developing and implementing community programs and activities. Black organizations that comprise the UBC are wholeheartedly concerned about and committed to developing a forum through which community organizations and institutions, be they of a political, educational, cultural, economic, or spiritual nature, can communicate, coordinate, and cooperate in unity towards establishment of a viable political and economic power base in the African community. For what? For self-determination and self-reliance, with a strong emphasis on organizational and functional unity. So very important for us at this time. So UBC is essentially grounded in the Nguzo Saba, or the 7 principles of Blackness. And as Baba said, we each month have forums to focus on important issues in our community. We sponsor many activities during the year, such as the monthly forums like the one tonight, important topics that impact our community on a daily basis, such as healthcare, education, violence in our community. So KUZALIWA and Brother Malcolm in May, a Love Supreme annual tribute to John Coltrane in September, and of course, at the end of the year, we do a whole week of Kwanzaa activities. So in keeping with our format, let me pay tribute to the ancestors. Divine spiritual blessings of peace, love, power, optimal health, joy, happiness. In the spirit of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, our Black shining prince, brother who showed the way for us, who spoke of liberation and justice, and certainly left us with a powerful message over the years. And we pay tribute to him tonight in honor of his legacy. Cosmic African vibration upon all of us, and may we enjoy this program tonight. Santi Sana, we now turn it back over to Baba Kalechi.
But Rashford, we
I have a
also want
pleasure.
to thank our participants as well for coming on board and participating. All of the scheduled guests we have.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. We have a number of speakers scheduled to speak tonight. I thought Bob Fletcher was on.
You're both.
Going to give us the format.
You're both. Thank you,
But
Baba.
I think also with our libation, we would like to have a moment of silence for some of our recently departed warriors. Baba Dr. Aminifu Harvey, Brother James Richmond, and also in honor of the brothers whose home service I'm now attending. That's why I'm sitting in the car here talking to everyone. Brother John Davies. So we want to give a moment of silence for those three departed brothers. Sante Sana.
Something to son about.
P2 Bob.
So we're gonna jump right into the program. We have really three dynamic speakers today and some very powerful performances. The first speaker that we have is Dr. Nubia Kai. Dr. Nubia is known to many of us. She received her bachelor's degree from Wayne State University in Anthropology and Black Studies, master's degree from the University of Wisconsin in African Languages and Literature, and a PhD in African Language and Film from Howard University. A poet, playwright, storyteller, and novelist, Dr. Nubia has won numerous awards for her writing, including 3 Michigan Council for the Arts Awards, 5 DC Commission of the Arts Awards, 2 National Endowment of the Arts Awards, and the Larry Neal Writers Competition for Poetry. She's been published in Black Scholar, Black World, Essence Magazine, Black American Literature Forum, Quilt, Catalyst, Solid Ground, City Arts Quarterly, and many, many more, including the Journal of African Literature Association, Black Camera, Journal of African American History, and so many journals and anthologies. She's also a poet. A novelist, among many, many things. One of my favorite pieces of her is "Spread My Wings and I Fly." She's here really to share with us today. She usually shares poetry with us, but we know she also has a wealth of knowledge on the subject of Brother Malcolm, especially with regard to his politics and our understanding of it. So I'm so pleased to have her with us today. So without further ado, Dr. Nubia Kai. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, both.
Okay. All right. Good. Because it was saying my microphone wasn't working, so I was going to call if necessary. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure and an honor to come here and and to celebrate and commemorate our great brother Malcolm, Malcolm X, El-Hajj, Malik, El-Shabazz, OMOWOLE. And I was told the subject was going to be on the politics of Malcolm X. So I'll try and do what I can to talk about that and my interpretation of his politics. Malcolm X's politics was, in a nutshell, a politics of common sense. I'm referring to a comment made by Denzel Washington in an interview where he was asked about Malcolm X teaching hate. Denzel said, when the sheep tells the wolf, I'm not going to let you eat me no more, he's not teaching hate, he's teaching common sense. Still in character from the remarkable role he played in Spike Lee's classic film on Malcolm X, Denzel displays the same wisdom and wit that Malcolm used to display in his interviews with racist reporters. His politics was a politics of common sense, a politics of intelligence and integrity. Malcolm showed us that if we used our common sense and intelligence, we wouldn't be in the situation we find ourselves in. We would come to the logical conclusion that Malcolm did. Revolutionary Black nationalism was the common sense and intelligent solution to our problem. It made no sense to fight in wars and give your life to kill other innocent people of color while failing to protect your own families from lynchings, race massacres, police brutality, and murder. It made no sense to dislike your color, your hair texture, and features that God blessed you with. It made no sense to have no interest in your history and culture while trying to assimilate with the people who hate and oppress you. It is not intelligent to despise and demean where you come from. As the African proverb says, only a fool points to his ancestry with his left hand. Malcolm made us understand the need to connect spiritually and politically with Africa, our motherland. It was simple common sense, but it was common sense beaten out of our heads from centuries of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and white racist terror. Malcolm's politics was an idea whose time had come. The force of an army couldn't stop it. Civil rights activism set the idea in motion, but Malcolm shifted the narrative from the self-effacing direction it was going in to a narrative of Black pride, self-reliance, and self-determination. It was an idea whose time was well overdue. Not since the 1920s, Marcus Garvey UNIA movement, had we heard such language so eloquently espoused. That Malcolm's parents were Garveyites who were victims of a brutal murder and mental institutionalization for their political beliefs made his message all the more pervasive and powerful. Their lives and deaths were not in vain. Their ideas of self-determination and Pan-African unity were realized on a global scale through their son. It was as if he was celestially ordained to be a voice of the people, a voice that resonated deep into the inner corridors of our souls and woke us up from the deep sleep of ignorance to see the divine light of our own Black genius and beauty. Malcolm's politics was a politics of restitution, an example of his life, his beginnings nurtured in Midwest Mississippi-style racism, his close family destroyed by white terrorists and state welfare system, his descent into criminal life, his imprisonment that forced him to go inside and discover his true self. Recently, I heard a program on Malcolm X, and the speaker said he thought Malcolm was compromised by Islam. I'm not sure exactly how he meant this, but I had always believed that Malcolm was inspired and complemented by Islam, specifically the message of the Nation of Islam that was a continuation of Garveyism framed in an Islamic spiritual tradition. Malcolm's faith, fortitude, and spirituality undergirded his revolutionary principles. Hundreds of thousands of former criminals like Malcolm turned their lives around because the nation's message of seeking knowledge of self, Black history, Black culture, and their divine rights to freedom, justice, and sovereignty was refreshingly appealing. We all knew that if Elijah Muhammad had called for a jihad, a holy war against the enemy, the Nation of Islam members would have been some of the first to go forward. But Elijah Muhammad unlike Malcolm, was not willing to wage an armed defense against the police who shot and killed Muslims in Los Angeles Mosque number 27 in April 27, 1962. The politics of Malcolm X and the politics of the Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad's leadership were becoming increasingly conflicted. It was during the Los Angeles crisis that Malcolm organized Fruit of Islam members of Harlem Mosque number 7 into a military team to retaliate against the LAPD officers who attacked the mosque. Elijah Muhammad refused to give the okay to proceed. Malcolm had no choice but to take a different route. He tried to form alliances with civil rights organizations, Black elected officials, and religious groups to collectively challenge racial discrimination and injustice. It was not easy. Many civil rights leaders refused to show up on the same program with Malcolm, knowing they would be discredited by their white liberal allies. Revisiting Malcolm X, The Ballot or the Bullet, recorded on April 12, 1964 in Detroit, he brilliantly delineates the options African Americans have to succeed or fail in the American manifest destiny experiment known as the United States of America. When Malcolm made this speech, the Southern wing of the Democratic Party was staunch segregationists who had disenfranchised Black workers throughout the South ever since the end of Reconstruction, which was 1877. It took almost 100 years before the civil rights movement restored their voting rights. Malcolm warned us that neither Republican nor the Democratic Party served our interests. One had a liberal, we're with the working class, Black or white rhetoric, while Republicans were openly hostile and racist. Each had the same goal of white supremacy. In The Ballot or the Bullet, Malcolm describes African Americans as a colonized nation within a nation. These same views were adopted by the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, the Revolutionary Action Movement, the Republic of New Africa, the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, League of Revolutionary Black Workers. The government has failed us, says Malcolm. Southern white Democrats, who Malcolm called Dixiecrats, were impossible to work with, which led Fannie Lou Hamer and other civil rights activists to form the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and activists from every ideological stripe to organize the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, 1972. And this year makes the 50th anniversary of that historic event. The objective of forming an independent Black political party was never realized. American politics has no room for third or fourth party platforms that differ from their pro-capitalist neoliberal politics. A two-party system with the same neo-colonial agenda is no different than a one-party system they love to criticize. When the Black Revolution, the idea of completely overturning the system didn't materialize, revolutionary nationalists began channeling their energies into other directions that could still gradually bring about progressive change. If they couldn't change the system from outside, they could try to change it from the inside. Though electoral politics was mistrusted, some of the Black Panthers in California started successfully running for political office. SNCC members, Marion Barry became mayor of the nation's capital. John Lewis became a venerated congressman. Julian Bond was elected to the House of Representatives in Georgia. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, organized the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Former Panther Bobby Rush became a congressman. People who you thought would never, ever go into politics, like Chokwe Lumumba, a minister of the Republic of New Africa. He successfully ran for the city council and the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. In other words, revolutionaries don't throw up their hands and say the revolution is over. They keep on pushing. They continue to work on whatever level they can to bring about social change. Malcolm's politics was a politics of resilience and perseverance. After he left the nation, he reached out to other Black leaders and started the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, modeled after the Organization of African Unity. Malcolm's politics was international, making alliances with African nations and taking the case of African Americans before the United Nations was a political priority before his untimely assassination. Malcolm's politics was Black arts. His life and legacy was the inspiration for Amiri Baraka's founding of the Black arts movement. Malcolm inspired a generation of poets, writers, painters, musicians, dancers, and actors to revolutionize arts in America and the world. There's no beginning or end to the impact of Malcolm's politics. He was 360 degrees of knowledge and wisdom radiating into every corner of Black consciousness. Listening to the ballad or the bullet, it is clear that Malcolm understood the importance of participating in the political process, even though that was not the end goal. It was politics of common sense. If the government wants to place a toxic waste dump in your community and this decision is put to a referendum vote, then you need to vote. A toxic waste dump affects your life, your health, your livelihood. Issues of healthcare, education, climate change, voter suppression, systemic racism, police massacres, mass incarceration, and abortion affect everyone. To allow others to dictate policies for you goes against the basic tenets of Black nationalism. To do for self does not mean cutting ourselves off from a political world that we still live in, breathe in, interact in every day. Many nationalists, Black religious groups, and socialist organizations who want nothing to do with US politics refuse to vote, forgetting or ignoring the fact that their foreparents fought, died, were beaten, mutilated, imprisoned, murdered, fired from their jobs, and banished from their homes for them to get the right to vote. To not vote seems like a betrayal of their monumental sacrifice. The choices between the devil you know, the Democrats, and the devil you don't want to know, the Republicans, is grim. Especially now, the way politics is going in America with the racist, white supremacist planned takeover of the government, teetering on the brink of fascism, I hope may no longer matter. The possibilities that Malcolm saw in a bloodless Black revolution, all they need to do is give the Black man his due. 50 years later, we know we have too many enemies who will never give us what is our due. The ballot or the bullet, liberty or death. With the loss of the ballot, we are left with no choice but the bullet. But we don't have bullets, and we don't make bullets or guns or artillery or bombs or chemical weapons like our enemies do. Without the ballot or the bullet, all we have left is our feet to stand up and fight back, to stand for something, to walk, march, protest, stand in, kick ass, run marathon races for our rights, to use Malcolm's politics of common sense and tell the wolf, we won't let him eat us anymore. So we can say like that Montgomery boycott protester, my feet is tired, but my soul is rested.
Asante Sana, Mama. Thank you so very much for sharing with us. And we're gonna ask people to hold their questions and comments until the end. You know, at the end, after all of our speakers have spoken, we'll have an opportunity to do a sort of a panel discussion to ask questions and you know, bring up topics and delve deeper as you will. So if you can even put it in the chat at this point if you'd like to, but you can also hold off until that time. So thank you, Mama. So we're gonna bring up our next speaker. Let me make sure he's ready for us. I believe he is. Yebo. So Dr. Small, Professor Small, I see him here. There we go. Greetings, Baba.
Greetings, my brother. Peace and sisters. Peace and blessings.
Hey, Bo, let me do I know we all know Professor Small well, but we'll do an introduction, you know, just so that we give him his proper due. Professor Small is a scholar, activist, dynamic speaker. He's the CEO of Sana Lodge Enterprise in Ghana Limited, CEO and president of African American Management Company, Ghana, international vice president of the Organization of African American Unity, OAAU, which was mentioned earlier, priest of Oya, Baba Lorisha, Ifa tradition, and the past president of the Eastern region of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, ASCAC. Professor James Smalls has been an activist since his teenage years. He's traveled extensively throughout the world, especially on the continent, but in the Caribbean, Europe, and throughout the United States. He has studied extensively with Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Yackerman, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Ivan Van Sertimer, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Wayne Nobles, and many, many more. He said, cut it off. The list is long. But we want to definitely acknowledge and recognize brother's long history working tirelessly for his people. And of course, Professor Smalls knew our brother Malcolm, and it's a great joy. It gives us really great joy to have him here to share with us today. So without further ado, Professor James Small.
Thank you, brother. And brothers and sisters, again, having listened to my sister and her analysis of history, there's much anyone needs to say. I so agree, sister, with your analysis. You were just right on, and explaining Malcolm in a way that most people don't see him. When he said the ballot and the bullet, he did offer us two possibilities at that time, and he did offer the ballot up first before the bullet. Some of us got it wrong and wanted to use the bullet before ever trying the ballot. And sadly, I don't think we've really seriously, especially the nationalistic thinking element, I don't think we seriously addressed the issue of how to use the ballot effectively. And I think it's still a very worthy tool. But we have to be clear, you know, when he was asked, oh, what did he mean by Black nationalism? He was very explanative. He said, it means you control the economic, politics, and culture where you live. We've never launched a serious effort at doing that. And that's still a possibility. And there's been a progressive move against us from getting control of the economics where we live, using other people of color against us in that manner, which almost neutralize our ability to fight ourselves. We haven't been very good at that. So any Black community you go into in America, the economic foundation is controlled primarily by whites in the larger industry and by other people of color who do not have an alliance with the African-American struggle or the struggle of those people of color in the United States of America over any historic period of time. And so what do? The the largest population. I don't even like that term, people of color. I used it in that context there. But the largest ethnic nation of people of color in the United States with the longest historical experience with the United States is that ethnic nation called the African Americans. And yet part of our political being is to identify with other peoples of color from all over the rest of the world as we fight our struggle. And we've engaged through most of the history of my life in the 76 years in trying to assist in other struggles of our people abroad, but we have not gotten the reciprocation. And so that means there's a lot of political education that needs to be done in those other communities. But at the same time, what do we do if we have not made a serious effort to get control of the economic, politics, and culture where we live? The average Black man or woman, and especially those who say I'm a nationalist or Pan-Africanist, cannot even tell you what the basic and most fundamental laws are about electoral politics in the jurisdiction they live. They probably couldn't tell you where the electoral board is in their city, or how to get a petition to mount a run for office. Now, if you've neutralized one of your political weapons almost completely, and they control the bulk of the other major political weapons, you've lost this game before you start. And we really haven't put up a fight to use the ballot in the way. There's an element of our community that have used the ballot very well, but they're not ideologically the people who were listening to a Malcolm X in the way some of us say we are, who call ourselves nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We have not been running for the political office in the way we should have. And we have not used political education to include how to seize the political power in the environment you're in. Even for those who say we understand guerrilla warfare, if you understand guerrilla warfare, you must master the ecology you find yourself in. You must learn it, control it, and use it. And we haven't done that very well. And I think Malcolm instructed us that we could use that very well to our advantage, and we have not done it. And I still think there's an opportunity to do it in many of the communities we find ourselves in, because we are as segregated today as we was 50 years ago. Actually, we may be more segregated today than we were 50 years ago, and that may still bid to our advantage if we take control of the economic, politics, and culture where we live, get control of land, labor, and resources where we live. That separate nation that we talk about, it has always been a separate nation, just that we didn't control the economics of it, nor the politics of it, nor the protection of it. We didn't grant food, we weren't in charge of giving the food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security to it. And so we couldn't see that we were separate. We still are separate. I grew up in South Carolina. I go home all the time. There is no more integration in my community now than there was when I left there 56 years ago. Longer than 56 years, almost 60 years ago now. And so when are we going to use the tools that Malcolm suggests we use? When are we really, and I'm talking now to those who say, I'm a nationalist, I'm a revolutionary, I'm a Pan-Africanist. Some of us did. Our sister mentioned some of our critical brothers who came from the SNCC, who came from the Black Panther Party, with Bobby, with Chukwe, with others. They successfully did, they showed us it could be done, but we really haven't organized that part of our movement. You know, we really haven't, and I really think we can still do that we can still take control of many of the communities we are in. When I say we, I'm talking about those who are considered have an ideological position that is Black nationalism, because nationalism has been viewed as a negative. And unfortunately, even by many people in the left, they think nationalism is a narrow negative. I don't think so. Controlling the economic, politics, and culture where you live, when you find yourself in a world such as the world we live in today, even is useful on the continent of Africa itself and in the Caribbean, where we're 90% of the population, we're still not in control of the economic, politics, and culture where we live. And we haven't addressed that really in a way that we could say, if we could provide the food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for our population, then we could talk to that population about political ideology in a way we can't talk to that population now. So I'm listening to my sister. I don't know there's much more than that I could say. You know, we know who killed Malcolm. Some who know me, I've been screaming FBI, CIA for 50 something years. And most people have dismissed me until some white movie came out last year. And now we're willing to look. But there were some of us who all along have pointed the fingers at those who did not want to see him in Algeria, along with Che Guevara, standing by Ahmed Ben Bella at a conference that was scheduled 2 weeks after the date he was killed, where him and Che was going to be the keynote speaker, speaking to the then non-aligned nations, which America and the Soviets were wooing to pull into their camps. And they could have crushed the American efforts in that regards, especially Malcolm's criticism. They knew that there were African states that had already, whose leadership had set aside to give Malcolm their time to present before the General Assembly. They did not want that, the State Department, to happen. Those things within 2 weeks or so of when they murdered him. Do they use us to murder ourselves? They're doing that every day in our community. That's nothing new, that they could find some people who were either in the Nation of Islam or who they could place in the Nation of Islam and then utilize them for their efforts. And I think they did it very well, because many of us went along with that for almost 5 decades and plus. But we're fighting not just a white man, we're fighting a system of exploitation, a system that is extraordinarily structured. And now they're using modern technology to embed the imperialism in place in such a way, if we don't do something really soon about taking control of where we live and who we are, it's going to take us another couple of 100 years to dismantle this thing. Because it's all about land, labor, and resources. It's about who's going to control the wealth of the world. The bulk of that wealth is in Africa and the Caribbean, not in the United States, not in England, not in France, not in Germany, not in Poland. They want access to that wealth. And they've proven over the centuries they're willing to commit any length of genocide to accomplish it. And right now, the bulk of that wealth sits straight in the black lap. So who's going to be genocide? It's going to be us. And so I think we're still at the question of the ballot or the bullet. And I think if we use the ballot well, it'll give us a bit of an upper hand in North America, while we work and take a model from Malcolm and make the kind of alliances with the progressive communities in Africa and the Caribbean that's necessary in order to cause changes there. Because Black faces in high places has proven not to be worth a damn. And so we have to challenge those leaderships. I just walked backwards out of a conference someone offered me 2 days ago to deal with the OAU, meaning the African Union. I think the African Union at this point is a joke. It has possibilities that progressive forces can take control of it, but that's not happening right now. So we need to create another kind of a Pan-African force that can make a statement in Africa and the Caribbean and the United States. And we haven't been moving strongly towards that. Pan-Africanism is not dead. We just have not defined it in the context we need to around the economic politics of culture, around, even if you have to use the word propaganda. How do we use this technology to inform, to instruct our youth, and to get the young people to understand the history that I just saw laid out, and find out what their role in this process must be if we're to cause the kind of change that will allow them to change the world they want to live in for the children that they're producing for the next generation. And I don't think we're moving heavily enough towards that. And most of the events I go to, at 76, I'm the average age, then the movement is dead. I was happy on the 19th to go to Malcolm Cemetery, and so that the overwhelming majority of the people there was under 30. I was ecstatic to see these young people and to let them speak up and to tell them it's their time. and that we got their back, and that they're the best generation we've ever produced. And we have to show them that we mean that by trying to help them get the tools to analyze what has gone on and to come up with a design to rebuild society so that they are the ones providing the food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for themselves and their family, and learning how to defend that efforts by whatever means necessary. I think that's all I could say on the subject of Malcolm. He wasn't the first spirit that pointed us this way. We had the Dessalines, we had the others, but he's one that came in the modern times that have lasted as one of the best models we have of how to be a freedom fighter, how to be a man, how to transform myself so that I'm better tomorrow than I was yesterday, and struggling for this thing we call freedom. That's my Malcolm now. He's my blueprint. Even at my age, I'm still transforming and how to be a better man and learning how to give some kind of leadership. I think somebody said a while ago, but one thing I'm happy that I found out or I really know is how much I don't know and how much there is to know. And studying Malcolm, you can't go wrong in looking for that transformative ideas and concept to go up against the system. So I thank you for the opportunity just to be here with you all today.
Sante Sana Baba, thank you so much. And we, as I mentioned, we will have opportunity to ask questions. So just if you have questions, you can jot them down. You can put them in the chat. We want to have a little bit of interaction as well. But before we go further, we want to have a little bit of musical interlude, just to break up the conversation a little bit, but still keep us in that spirit. So, Brother Kaba put together something for us. So we're going to check that out right now.
We won't keep waiting for something to come down from the sky to solve their problems and make them vibrate from low to high. But it don't work that way, my friend. That's the way to go to bed. But what we need is to transcend. That's the freedom lies within. Going no sense in trying to take it. Everybody's not gonna make it. You want freedom, you must take that. Everybody's not gonna the way of life free, but there's no question. Everybody's not gonna make it. Freedom's not free, freedom is taken. Everybody's not gonna jump in the night and make it. Keep you updated. I'm made in the light of creator and creation, so the data keep you safe. Everybody ain't gonna make it. It's moving. Time to research, keep it moving. Your plans for no America is all laid out. I watch it outside the matrix, see it all play out. I make an observation, then I have an obligation to tell the truth. Let it transcend generations, release the frustration from these cameras that watch. Break time constraints, these Gregorian clocks. Face fear, that's a better by the media. Expose, right or wrong, it's like the media is believing this so damn long. Thought to get it, everybody ain't gonna listen. Even make the effort, you been looking for a savior or a shepherd instead of leaving the message that the ancestors left. After unlearning what you have learned from those concerned with preventing your evolution, the insatiable desire to know self will dissolve, illusion, action, illuminating perception. And darkness, perception. Red pill ingestion, skill set perfection. How will we get at the level of conception? So we can see the new relations, new villages, and new nations. The switching traps and bridging gaps from conception to creation. In the absence of belief, there lies knowledge. Applied knowledge plus time equals wisdom. forming new paradigms, promoting ancient values, future vision. Behold, everything is transition, and use it as your ambition. Because whether or not you make it is strictly your decision, should you choose to accept it as your mission. People keep waiting for something to come down from the sky to bring them freedom, help them see themselves in a better life. But it don't work that way, my friend. When for change is all within, when what we need to transcend, the path to freedom lies within. So ain't no sense in trying to fake it, cause everybody's not gonna make it. You want some freedom, you gotta shake it. Everybody's not gonna make it. That red, that black, that green for liberation. Freedom's not free, freedom is taken.
Thank you. That was Brother Kaba, along with Precise Science, and rest and power to Brother Rough Mike, who transitioned. I think today would actually be his 52nd birthday. So rest in power, brother. And we're definitely blessed to still have his work with us. Of course, we always appreciate Brother Kaba and everything he collaborates and brings to the community. So I'm gonna call Baba Rafiq to share something with us.
Yebo Baba, Sante Sana.
Santa Sana Baba.
Program has been very beautiful, very informative, very profound, really. So far, and now we're gonna move toward our last speaker, brother who worked closely with Brother Malcolm.
Baba, can we do a collection before? Skip that part.
Oh, Yebo, I'm sorry about. Yes, sir. So we here at UBC sponsor many different programs throughout the year, and we appreciate it when the community can help us financially by helping us defray some of the costs of making these wonderful programs available to our community. So if you are in a position to do so, if you're so inclined, and we certainly will appreciate it if you are, that you can donate to our purposes and to our efforts. So, Baba, we can use Cash App or GoFundMe?
Cash App, African Freedom Fund, and then PayPal, KwanzaaDC@gmail.com. But Cash App is African Freedom Fund.
Yeah, but we would greatly appreciate any donations you can make. We're a nonprofit organization. We ask the community help to support us so we can continue with our programming, activities for the community throughout the years. And so, again, that's Cash App, African Freedom Fund, $ African Freedom, African Freedom Fund, right, Bob?
Yeah, bro.
And get the PayPal
It's
information again, please.
KwanzaaDC@gmail.com.
Yeah, Bo. Sante Sana. So I think we have Brother Peter on board. Brother Peter, are you with us? Let's see.
Yeah, bro. He's there. He has to turn on his
He's
video.
on, okay. Great. So let me give a little introduction to our great brother. We are indeed blessed to have him with us tonight. He has always been ready and willing to answer the call. He's been a dedicated warrior and scholar through the years on behalf of the spirit of Brother Malcolm, on behalf of our community, on behalf of our liberation. So A. Peter Bailey is an African journalist, author, and lecturer. He was an associate of Brother Malcolm X and a member of the organization Afro-American Unity. Brother Bailey was born in Columbus, Georgia. Actually, he told me earlier he was born in Tuskegee, Alabama. So maybe this information I have is incorrect. But anyway, he'll correct me on that. Born on February 24, 1938, and raised in Tuskegee, Alabama. Okay. He was in the Army from 1956 to 1959 and attended Howard University until 1961. In 1962, Brother Peter moved to Holland. That June, he heard Malcolm X speak near Mosque number 7. When Brother Malcolm left the Nation of Islam in 1964, Brother Peter became a founding member of his organization of Afro-American Unity. Brother Peter served as editor of the group's newsletter titled Black Lash. He was a pallbearer at Malcolm X's funeral in 1965. Brother Peter served as associate editor at Ebony from 1968 to 1965. He was associate director of the Black Theater Alliance from 1975 to 1981, and he edited the Black Theater Alliance newsletter. In 1998, he wrote Seventh Child Family, memoir about Brother Malcolm X with Malcolm X's nephew, Rodney Collins. He wrote Revelations, the autobiography of Alvin Ali in 1995, based on interviews he conducted with the choreographer in the years before his 1989 death. In 2013, he wrote a memoir titled Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, the Master Teacher. Brother Peter Bailey has contributed articles to the Black Collegian, Black Enterprise, Black World, Essence, Jet, the Negro Digest, and the New York Daily News, and the New York Times. He writes a bi-monthly column for the Trice Edney Wire Services. He also does a column for the Washington Informer magazine or newspaper here in DC. Brother Peter Bailey has lectured at Malcolm X, about Malcolm X, I'm sorry. Brother Peter has lectured about Malcolm X at 36 colleges and universities. He taught as an adjunct professor at Hunter College, the University of District of Columbia, and Virginia Commonwealth University. So I'll now present to you great A. Peter Bailey. Sante Sana. Brother Peter, you're on. Is Brother Peter there?
Yeah, his video was on for a second, and then it's but his audio is on, so maybe having a.
Maybe he can't hear us.
It's possible. We're gonna do a performance while we sort this out. We're gonna do a performance.
Okay.
We're gonna do that right now, right, Bob?
Let me give him a call.
Yeah, bro. We can do that.
See if we can connect with him. Okay.
We have a slight musical interlude while we contact Bob.
Yeah, that's what I was calling you about.
5,000 years of culture to the world stage.
Right. So Brother Peter said he had a connection issue. He was coming back in, but I don't see him just yet. So I think what we should do is we should go ahead and entertain any questions or comments from attendees. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask, you can put it in the chat. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand electronically. I'm gonna bring back Professor Smalls and Barbara speak. What do you think about that? And as well as Sister Nubia. That
We still haven't been able to connect with.
right? He's still, yeah. He's connecting. Okay, looks like he's connecting. You know, it's,
I see.
yeah, it's connecting, but he hasn't quite. Well, let's give him a second. I know he's traveling, so it's a little.
Yeah, he's on somebody else's computer. I'm gonna give him a call now.
Okay.
Again.
I thought I saw him, but oh, here he is. We got him. Brother Peter, can you hear us?
Got him?
Brother Peter, can you hear us?
Looks like he's looking at the computer now.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he can hear us. Okay, it looks like his audio is still connecting. He probably can't hear us.
No, I don't think he can.
Yeah, it's still connecting, it looks like.
I'm gonna call him again. Okay.
Well, it didn't connect. There's something set up with his audio. You may have to try to go out and come back in.
Okay.
You can see him fine, but his audio is not connecting. So if we could, Sister Nubia, I don't know can you join us with Professor Smalls? Professor Small, we want to have a little question and answer while we wait for Brother Peter to get his connection together. It looks like he's working on it. His video is working, but his audio is not quite.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it looks like it's. Yeah, he's gonna need to come back in and go back out and come back in. So anyway, while we wait for that, we have to be versatile dealing with this technology. So I have a question, and the audience, please, if you have any question, any topic on the topic that you'd like our speakers to address, please let us know. But I can start off with one question. Why do you, and this is for both of you, why is Brother Malcolm so important to Black people all over the world? Either of you can feel free to pine on that.
Mr. Nubia?
I think he was important because of the impact that he had on people's lives. I would say that Malcolm, he's important because he had the kind of impact, he had the kind of voice, the nomo force, the word force. The word force that brought creation into being. Malcolm possessed that. And that's why he had the impact that he had. You know, I guess I'm kind of like in a way saying he was like a prophet or a messenger, like a messenger of God. They called Elijah Muhammad the messenger, but I think Malcolm also was the one who was really carrying the message to the people. So I think that's why he has that impact, because his words had that impact. They were like seeds, you know, that are planted in your mind and planted in your soul, and you grow from it. So that's just my reason.
And you know, I'm going to be agreeing with you all night, because you're so on point. You know, Malcolm, most of the speakers of his day were speaking to white people. They were talking to a white audience, even when they were with a Black audience. Malcolm spoke directly to Black people. He was speaking to us about what we had to do. He was describing for us what the system was like and what it was doing and what we had to do to dismantle that hold on us. And people heard him. Today, when you see young people, the first thing they'll tell you, I read Malcolm X's autobiography and it changed me. You know, yes, 2 days ago at the gravesite, when we were at the pilgrimage, and we called up young people at random every year and others. We don't have special speakers. We just ask someone from the audience to come and speak. Why did you come here today? And one of the young men I called up was a young Puerto Rican brother who I'd seen out there. He'd been there for about 3 years coming. And he said, when I was in high school, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. It changed my life because I realized, yes, I'm Hispanic and Puerto Rican, but I'm African. And I'm also oppressed by a system. Malcolm told him that, and he heard it. And he told all of us that, you know, that I'm speaking to you about you. I'm telling you about a system that is oppressing you. And I'm telling you what you need to do. Not only verbally am I telling you how to dismantle it, watch me. Look at how I transform myself into a better self in order to meet this task. Use me as a model. And I think he's one of the best models we had of the transformation of the human character and the imbuing of the courage it took to take on a system, knowing what the power of that system was. He gave me courage. He made me want to stand up. I wanted to be like him. He was the best model even today. I met him, I was 16 years old, and that was 63. But he's still my best model, the best example of how I can be a Black man. And I think I'm not alone. That's what other people felt when he spoke to us, because he spoke to us, not to white people. He was speaking to us.
Yabo, and that's definitely that's a sentiment that, as you said, we can understand. It speaks to so many of us, and me personally, I can definitely appreciate that. Brother Malcolm was transformative, very transformative for me, and probably like no other singular figure across the population of African people, and it's not just here in the United States, but globally, and that's the key. So what would Brother Malcolm say to Black people today, in the state that we are, especially in America after 50 years of not listening to his advice, guidance, tutelage, direction? What would he say to Black people today, both in America and the greater world, especially on the continent?
Well, first, some people did listen to him. Now, don't say no one listened. Some of us did listen. And we see changes in the Caribbean. We see changes on the continent of Africa. We see changes here in America. We didn't just take a beating and kept falling down. We fought back in America. And though we don't praise ourselves for some of the battles won, we won some of these battles against the system. But it's a powerful system. And you've got to be consistent and have continuity in your fight against it. And you got to be clear on what it is you're fighting. If you're going to dismantle something, you have to know what it is you got to dismantle, where and why. And I think today, the message doesn't change because the system that oppresses us worldwide haven't changed. They've made themselves more sophisticated. They've gotten more technology and tools at hand. But the primary thing is to oppress people for the purpose of controlling the wealth of the world. For 1% or 2%, whatever they represent, to control the wealth of the world, and whomever they have to kill to do that, they've been willing to do that. And it didn't start in 1492. They were doing that when we first encountered them a couple of thousand years before. By 1492, we had taken quite a whipping. We were ready to turn to almost anybody for help. We only had that thing to turn to. And so what we've got to realize is what his analysis, we got to truly read Malcolm, truly study him, listen to him, listen to those speeches, listen to that biography. He was giving us instructions on what to do next when you realize you have found yourself where you found yourself. What's your next step? Read his works. It'll tell you what the next step is.
Mr. Nubia?
Yeah, I would think that he would be doing the same kind of thing he was doing when he was alive. I think he would be trying to work with other different political organizations within the United States and within the Caribbean and Africa, because he was definitely international. He understood the importance of that. I should hope that he would also, and I think we talked about this last year when the subject was Malcolm X and self-defense. I would think that he would also be organizing some kind of underground defense military or army. I like to say, or at least I would hope so, on the line of the Deacons of Defense or the Old Fruit of Islam or the Black Legionnaires and the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense. Not openly in the way it was done before, but like I say, an underground movement in order to at least mitigate against a lot of these police murders. All right, and now it's police murders or self-described vigilantes, like the guy Zimmerman and this other Kyle Rittenhouse, who are hailed as heroes. I think he would be organizing forces to counter something like that. I also think he would be operating as far as Africa and the Black diaspora. I think he would be taking the issue before the UN. As a matter of fact, last year around this time, I think around April, the UN came out with a 188-page report on the treatment of African Americans in the United States, and they say it constituted crimes against humanity. So people around the world know, I think Malcolm would be in the forefront of taking our struggle to the international courts, or to the international level, taking it to other countries in Africa, in Europe, in Indonesia, Asia, wherever. Those are things I think he would be doing. And I think Professor Smalls is on point when he says there's a lot of instruction in Malcolm's speeches and in his biography. And like he was saying how the biography influenced him. When I was teaching at Howard, and I used to ask my students, I used to ask them about what art form did they experience. You know, it could be a painting or a poet or even a historical text or a piece of music or musical, where once you experience this art, you were not the same person you were before you experienced this interaction with this work of art. And over and over and over, for those who had read Malcolm X, I got the autobiography of Malcolm X. For me also, that was a book, when I read it, I was not the same person I was before I read it. Another piece, and I hear this from everybody that is in the theater world, right? Actors, playwrights, producers, Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. It also had that kind of impact. I thought it was interesting that their birthdays are the same day. I think it's different year, but they're both on May 19th, their birthday. That play had quite an impact. I was not the same person. I saw that when I was in high school. But I was not the same person that I was before I went into the high school auditorium that day and saw that play. So again, Malcolm's autobiography, huge impact. It literally turned people's lives around. And again, that's something coming from something divine, something very spiritual.
Okay, sounds good, Baba and Mama. And I looks like my brother Peter is with us. That's his audio I'm hearing, so that's progress. But let me go ahead and try this again.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Can you turn on your audio, your video?
It says your microphone is unmuted, your video is stopped. And
Yeah.
how do I unstop the video? I'm afraid to touch anything.
No problem. I just sent you a button. You gotta click on that button.
Okay, that says start my video. So here I am. I just hit it.
Perfect. Got it. You did it, Bob. Thank you so much. And thank
your microphone is unmuted. Your video is started.
Yep, we can see you and we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for having patience with technology. We really wanted to make sure you were with us. Baba Rashfik already did your introduction, so please feel free to start and share whatever you would like to share with us regarding Brother Malcolm.
Okay. I think one of the most important things that Brother Malcolm did, at least, in from everything from my introduction to him, I moved to Harlem in the summer of 1962. I remember it was in June of 1962. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember I moved in on a Friday night, and on Saturday morning, instead of unpacking, I decided to go and walk down Lenox Avenue with a friend of mine, and then now Malcolm X Boulevard, then Lenox Avenue, and walk down to 125th Street. And we did so. It was my first time really being in Harlem, and I was just fascinated by it. And then we got to 125th, so we said, let's walk a little further. And we got down to 116th. And we got down to 116th, we saw a crowd gathering. We said, what's going on? And they said, Malcolm X is going to speak. And my first reaction was, oh, Malcolm X, because I had heard about him vaguely at the time, usually stuff, oh, he hates white people, he advocates violence, that kind of stuff. But I heard about him. I've never heard him speak anything. I just vaguely heard about him from a couple of other people. So I said to my friend, I said, let's stop and hear what he's got to say. And so we got 116th Street. He was speaking across the street from the Nation of Islam Mosque was a wide sidewalk, and they had set up there. And in a couple of minutes, Brother Malcolm came out and he spoke. And I remember he did a long speech. It was almost 3 hours that day. But that was one thing that he said that day that I had never heard before in my life. He talked about attacks on the mind. And I had never heard anyone, I'm 24 years old at that time, I had never heard anyone talk about attacks on the mind. And then Brother Malcolm went on and talked about, the whole psychological warfare, the attacks on the mind, and I was just totally fascinated by this, hearing this, because then I remembered, I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama. And I remember going to movies Saturday after Saturday with friends of mine to the segregated movie theater downtown. And unlike many places, Tuskegee had a separate movie theater for whites and a separate movie theater for blacks. They were right next door to each other. And us kids, when I was a kid, between, let's say, ages of about 6 and 14, every Saturday we'd go downtown to the movies, and we watched, most of the time, they were showing Tarzan movies or those kind of movies. And we would be sitting there in that movie theater, I don't know, 400 or 500 black youngsters. And we would be cheering for Tarzan and Cheetah, laughing at the Africans, because when they got together, they didn't speak English, and we thought they couldn't speak English, and we laughed at them. And I mean, it was just constant, and we did this constantly, year after year, Saturday after Saturday, between the ages of about 6 and 14. And so, of course, when I was growing up, you could call somebody like a curse name, you could call them a curse word, like an MF or an SOB, and they might fight you. You call them an African, they would fight you. If you call them African or black, you had to fight. And that's the way it was. And so when I heard Brother Malcolm, and this went on, as I grew older and everything, all the stuff, you're dark but pretty, and if you had long hair, you'd be much better looking, and all those things you would hear a black folks saying, when she's dark but pretty, and all of those kind of things I heard, but I never heard anybody. And then I heard Brother Malcolm talk about psychological warfare, and it put all of that into view for me. And I became an instant supporter of Brother Malcolm from that day that I heard him speak the first time. And it was mainly because he that subject, and that's the subject that he's talked that I have really followed closely for the rest of my life. Whenever I talk to students or anybody, I talk about the necessity of us to have a strong campaign to combat psychological warfare. And I don't think we have had one since Brother Malcolm, was left us or was taken away from us. Some people have tried. Dr. Celia Lewis Tucker went after that whole gangster rap thing. And she cited many times about why she was doing that. She quoted Brother Malcolm. Of course, Frances Cress Welsey talked about psychological warfare, but she didn't have like the big national platform that Brother Malcolm had, and I would listen to her like at seminars that she would have, and things like that. But other than that, people who were in quote unquote leadership positions usually did not spend a whole lot of time talking about this psychological thing. And that's what about Brother Malcolm that has stuck with me through all these years, from 1962 right up into to 2022, is that we must be more forthright and aware of and develop concrete ways to combat this type of psychological warfare that is inflicted on our people. And we haven't. We really haven't. There have been some people who tried, but those of us who do try, we kind of work in our own little small groups. We never think about calling together a group of Black folks for the express purpose of how combating psychological warfare. And I really think we need to do that, because that's been a very, very weapon of the white supremacists in this society. So Brother Malcolm said I wrote an article on him in 1967 when we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of his birth in 1967. And I said in that article, and he talked about what we should do politically, economically, and then culturally. He said, culturally, we must develop a way to combat television stations, television programs, newspaper articles, radio programs, school textbooks, these kinds of things. And we have never had made any kind of serious, organized effort to do that. I mean, you have a bit people doing here, a bit over there, a bit over there, a bit over there. But there's never been a serious group of Black folks joining together and coming up with concrete ways that we can more effectively confront the psychological attacks on us that are done by the I heard just something they were talking about something. I heard the radio this morning. They were talking about some new, I don't know what it was, a flu. They call it the monkey flu. It said it came out of Africa. They were talking about another disease. It's a flu disease, but they called this one the monkeypox, whatever it was, because it came out of Africa. and that, you know, that it came out of Africa. I heard that just this morning, and that kind of thing. And just on a level, you know, on a much larger, that's like a minor thing compared to what goes on a larger level. And we must understand, and I think we do understand, most of us, but we still got to come up with a way to deal with it. The reason history is basically psychological. The teaching of history is psychological warfare. And that's why the real white power structure in this country, and that includes not just the so-called far right, off-right type folks, but most white folks in this country do not want the true history taught, because history is a way of confronting and dealing with the psychological attacks that they have used on us. And so I would really love to see a group of people who strongly believe in what Brother Malcolm is all about. And brothers and sisters, I'm at this state now in my life, I'm 84 years old now, where I'm not out to reach, quote unquote, the masses. I think we gotta organize the people who believe in certain things. And then once we do that and get those folks organized, then we do outreach to the people who have to be educated and convinced and persuaded. But you cannot build something when you're trying to deal with people who constantly, you have to be persuaded. And we've tried that. So I remember in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, we did that. We'd have 20 people maybe in a little group. And we know from watching things that 5 of them are serious. The other 15, you know, they are being, and so then we go and plan something, a conference or anything that requires 20 people to do it successfully. And of course, it didn't happen because those other 15 people were not serious. And what we should have done, knowing that we only had 5 serious people, is plan something that 5 people can do. Then any of those others want to help out, fine, but we would not be dependent on them. We put together something that 5 people can put together and do successfully, instead of planning something for 20 when we only knew 5 people were serious. And I think that we have a tendency, especially back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, to do that too often. And so that's what Brother Malcolm mainly meant to me. He taught us, man. He was the first person in my life to introduce to me the whole concept of attacks on the mind and how you must get your mind together if you're really going to be able to successfully confront the believers and the supporters and the practitioners of white supremacy.
Son Baba, thank you so much. I'm gonna bring Professor Small and Dr. Nubia back so they can join you on our virtual panel. I'd like to again remind the audience, if you have any questions for anyone or any combination of our speakers, please feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to speak it. Or any comments, feel free to do so. I will ask, we have one hand up. Go ahead, Brother Lyndon.
Yes, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Good. First of all, it's glad to see everybody. And Brother Peter Bailey, you met me at the Audubon Ballroom, would have been Malcolm X's 80th birthday. And it was you and Brother Benjamin were there together. And also, I went to school with Brother Tahuti, who helped take care of Brother Earl Grant. How are you?
Yes. I talked to Tahuti last week.
Oh, good. And Brother James Smalls, Professor James Smalls, it's good to meet you after all this time.
Thank you, sir.
This is my question. I have a comment, then a question. It bothers me that, for the most part, you know, no shade here, but when it comes to Malcolm X historians, they deal with everything except the fact that, if the truth be told, he went from tribe of Shabazz to Afro-American. And I think one of the things that gets overlooked is right in the chapter El-Hajj, Malik, El-Shabazz, where he was basically talking about, he was firmly corrected over the term Negro. And he said an African told him the term Afro-American has greater meaning and dignity. and he has sincerely apologized. That's when he was in Africa the first time, during the time when he was there and made his Hajj. Yes, made his Hajj. So my question is, why is it that most historians who call themselves Malcolm historians don't deal with that at all?
Well, let me comment. I think I deal with it every time I open my mouth. I talk about the transformation because that's a key part of understanding him. And he was, he told us that history was best to reward all research. And he was talking about how the knowledge of history gets rid of this white man's mystery. But we see him transform himself with knowledge. And he was clear and truthful as he went through these transformations. And he didn't try to be bigger than the people he was teaching. He was trying to be a model by showing, I did this, I've accomplished this. I'm an example of the next step. And there are a few who do talk about it. I haven't written anything. Some people say I should. I thought I've just been too busy out here running my mouth, Peter. And it's good to see Brother Peter, because Roddy called me and told you he was at the Audubon, but I was kind of under the weather after I left the cemetery, so I didn't come by the other day.
Okay.
But I think we need to put more emphasis on the transformation, but I'd like to also focus on what Peter was saying, and it is the psychological warfare. And in almost all of his speeches, when you listen to the earliest speeches where he's standing in front of Mishaw's bookstore, he's talking about how our minds are being controlled. He's talking about the drugs. He's talking about the smoking. He's talking about the alcohol. He's talking about our misuse of our women. He's constantly trying to address it that somebody has gotten into our minds and have us behaving in a certain way with information. And his whole transformation, going back to his biography and looking at the time in prison, when he begins to read again, he was always a very bright young man. He was not some young man that discovered that education had value. He was bright when he was in school. He was very studious, very scholarly. And he continued that at some point while he's incarcerated. And his brothers who's bringing him information about this new organization that is transforming Black men in the Black community, the Nation of Islam, he's attracted to this transformative thing that is a part of who he is until the day he died, because he does go from Malcolm Little, like he says, to Big Red, as people tend to point out, but he's transforming. He's dealing with the environment he finds himself in, and he's trying to reckon with that environment. When he comes up to the Nation of Islam and he becomes Malcolm X, and then he becomes Brother Shabazz, and then he becomes, OMOWOLE. We're almost afraid to address the OMOWOLE last phase he was in. And he was evolving based on knowledge and understanding of the history of his people and the methodology of control of the enemy. And that methodology hasn't changed. All this technology we're using today, they're still using the same technology to bamboozle us. They use our music. We don't control the music industry. We sing, we make money, but it's controlled by the same Jewish and Italian music mafia that has been controlling it since the jazz singer back in the 1920s. And that was a part of the mind control process. So I would like to suggest, Brother Peter, there is one group that had really tried to push forward, but again, like you said, you're trying to do something that 5 people could do well, and you got 50 trying to do it, and the other 45 really are not with you, and that's the National Association of Black Psychologists, and brothers like Dr. Wade Noble and Dr. Naim Akbar, and their work is very informative in trying to attack the mind control. And the last document that Dr. Noble wrote is called The Island of Meme, when he's talking about European mimetic infection. He's talking about the brainwashing and the mind control and how do we counter it. But again, we need to find that small group of people who really want to work to do that. And it's ironic that you came with the concept. I kind of kicked against it this morning. I was talking to Ezele Dante, and she said, Brother Small, don't talk to me about unity. Talk to me about the 4 or 5 people that I can work together and we can bring about change. And I fought her for almost an hour, and then it made sense. And now you come and said the same thing. So I must accept that as the message. You know, that's the message, and it makes sense to me now. But the transformation part of Malcolm is the message. That whole process of his life, that transformation, that's the message. I'm still trying to make a better me. I'm still trying to transform me. I'm 76, and I'm still trying to grow so I could be worthy of being a Black man. And it means we have to accept what needs to be changed, what's broken in us, what's fractured in us, what's shattered, what new tools we need to learn, you know, what new ideas we need to put as the weapon in the forefront. And that transformative concept that we see throughout Malcolm's life is one of the big lessons we all need to learn.
And brother, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that part of this too is we've got to stop giving our people excuses. Brother Malcolm did that. You know, when Brother Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam, and they were taking a lot of those young dudes who've been like, you know, like little street hoods and street thugs and doing that. I was told that he didn't start by telling them, "Oh, you poor." You know what he told them? By disrupting the Black community, by robbing Black people, by doing all the different things you're doing. You know what you are? You are basically have become an ally of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
And I know 3 young brothers that I know who joined the Nation of Islam told me that more than anything else, that's what reason why they eventually joined. Now, once they joined, then they got the, the lesson. But we got to stop always telling our people that, everything, white people did this. Well, we already know that. My thing is we got to start telling our people, hey, you're responsible for at least 50% of what are things that are happening to us today. We are responsible for it because of things that we do or that we don't do. I mean, we already know we have conferences, and instead of having a conference and talk about what are we going to do, how are we going to do this, following Brother Malcolm, he didn't have conferences to stand up and spend 50 hours talking about what the white man has done. He talked about what we need to be doing as a people. But we get together and have a 2-day conference, and I would say 85% of the conference, they be telling horror stories. And what they should be doing, maybe 10 minutes, say, white people do this, white people do so. And then after you do that, about 10 minutes of talking about what has been going on, don't want to hear the word white people or white supremacists for the next 2 days. All we want to talk about is what are we going to do? What are we going to do that Brother Malcolm suggested, that Dr. King suggested, that Fannie Lou Hamer suggested, that Marcus Garvey selected? These brothers and sisters offered us some concrete things to do as a group of people. And yet we get together at conferences and we always spend our time just moaning, going to what the white man is doing. Well, to me, my thing is this. There should be a conference based on Brother Malcolm's teachings and other people that we're going to get together and we're going to talk. But if you believe this, if you believe in Pan-Africanism, if you believe the necessity to fight psychological warfare, if you believe in these things, please come to this conference. If you don't, please don't come. This is not a conference for to try to educate people. This is a conference for the people who are true believers. We got to get together and start talking about what we can do. Now, later, once we get structured and organized, then we can reach out to the people who have to be convinced and educated and persuaded. But we do that all the time, man. Instead of getting the people who already believe certain things, get together and discuss what we can do to combat the white supremacists in this country, concrete things that we can do. Brother Malcolm had some great suggestions that we can do. Dr. King had some suggestions. Lerone Bennett Jr. had some suggestions. I mean, we need to discuss concrete things that were offered by people on this level, Fannie Lou Hamer, and things that they were talking about doing, and then begin to carry them out, and not spend 2 or 3 day conference talking about the horrors of white supremacy, because we already know that. And if you don't know that, then please don't come to this conference. This is a conference for the people who believe certain things about what we need to do as a people. This is not a conference to educate or to persuade. No, we'll do that later. I would love to see a conference like that called by serious Black folks. and get together and spend 2 or 3 days just talking about concrete things we can do in the areas of health, education, culture, economics, politics, technology, legal, communications, and self-defense. Have 8 divisions and have people who have strong knowledge in each one of those divisions, making concrete proposals of what we should do in each area to promote and protect our interests in this society and this world.
I agree with you 100%. I'm one of those people. So I'm volunteering myself as being one that's ready to do that.
That's good, brother. That's good. I think that would be powerful, because I think there are enough of us around the country who think like that, but we're in our little enclaves and we think we're the only ones.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our little things, we get together and talk with each other and think we're the only one. Instead of saying, if you believe this, if you believe this, if you believe this, please come to this camp. If you don't believe these things, please stay home. We'll talk to you later.
That sounds like a call to action, Baba. A very worthy one, very important one. And that sort of brings me to ask a question regarding the various organizations, groups, movements. There's a lot of political activity that in organizations that Black people, especially in America, are engaged in on various levels. There are popular ones, the ones that everybody knows about, talks about, and some not so popular. So my question is, of the movements or groups, organizations that are working today, that are active today, that are present in the minds of people today, that are actually engaged on the ground and the work today, whatever their particular focus is. Are there any of them that any of you would say that Brother Malcolm would be behind and or in support of? Just looking at what we actually have on the ground right now.
That's almost a loaded question. Malcolm would say that's a loaded question. I wouldn't even. They may be, every group that's out there may have a fragment, a bits and pieces, but I don't see any that has the clarity that Malcolm meant when he said make it plain. There's so much incessive ideology that they've almost paralyzed themselves. And there is no clear overarching ideology. I don't even like that word, but an overarching program that would affect Black people across the world if we begin to put together these programs and implement it in Black communities across the world. All of them seem too parochial. Every one of the groups are saying, I'm the one, we got the answer. And I'm sitting here waiting to hear the answer and I'm not hearing it. And we do need to get out of this parochialism. Religions have become our ethnicity. Ideologies have become our ethnicity. Wearing certain kind of uniform and brandishing a weapon that you dare not use have become our ethnicity. No. Some of us went through that in the 60s and we survived it with the blessings of ancestors and the divine. I mean, I can remember laying on the floor in LAX with 2 pistols and my pistol and a shotgun in my hand while LAX finest is moving my way to take us out. And in that moment, I knew I was going to die, and I knew we made a bad judgment on this issue in this way. And I don't want to say thank God, but the feds saved us because they stepped in with a force of their own because they didn't want all that blood spill. And Peter Ella was with me, hiding behind a counter. We were trying to save her life. And they didn't want to have Malcolm X's sister killed in an airport in LA. And so the feds stopped it. But we learned one thing. Those of us who carried the guns through the 60s and the 70s, it may not have been the best choice because we hadn't built an army, but we were carrying weapons. You know, we didn't have a strategy for military behavior, but we were carrying weapons and brandishing it, saying, look at me, come get me. Even I was stupidly taking pictures holding up weapons. But anyway, we need to do exactly what Peter Bailey is saying. And I've heard this twice in one day from the sister in Haiti and now you, almost the precise message. And I'm listening because it's making sense. And those of us who are of like mind and willing to come up with an action program to implement in place in those categories you name and maybe a few others, and then begin to move forward to implementation. I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I really believe that would be, if we want to honor Brother Malcolm, that would be the most significant way to do so, because we have nobody, no group, and everybody has knowledge about everything. You know, this division is focusing on education. This division is focusing on legal affairs. This division is focusing on culture. This division on politics. This division, and so if something happens politically, we know we got a group that's going to tell us, we've been watching this, and here's blah, 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 blah. In education, we got a group in education. I really, truly believe that if we could come up with something like that among people who have skills and knowledge and commitment, and international, and of course it's got to be Pan-African. My thing is these days is that everything we do now is got to also have a Pan-Africanist element. In fact, my position is that you can no longer be a Muslim Pan-Africanist, a Christian Pan-Africanist, a Ghanaian Pan-Africanist, a Nigerian Pan-Africanist, a Ethiopian Pan-Africanist. You got to be a Pan-Africanist Muslim, a Pan-Africanist Christian, a Pan-Africanist Nigerian, a Pan-Africanist Ghanaian, a Pan-Africanist Ethiopian, you know, and a Pan-Africanist African American. You got to have that as the first identity, to me, to build a real city, so that we can have some kind of solidity and ultimate goals and know things that connect us, man. And people, as I said before, I believe that all across this country, there are Black people who have knowledge and skill in these areas, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to do everything instead of an area where they have the most possibilities. And then things don't go right, then people get discouraged, or they go under. I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen this happen in the last 40 years. You know, people start off blah 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 blah, and where we go wrong is we think we can do everything. And we can't. You got to have, and Brother Malcolm, you know, understood that kind of thing. And when we were in the OAAU, you had complete, you know, you had these different, you know, the youth committee, the education committee, the self-defense committee, the economics committee, the political committee, the communications committee, which I was a part of, became editor of the newsletter, the legal committee, self-defense committee. That's where the OAAU was set up. And people people in the organization had skills in these different arenas. Because you know, he was assassinated so early, we were not able really to carry it out the way he had set it up. But if we could just do that, I think. And I think there are enough serious Black folks over this country who we could put together a serious thing that would put us in a much better position to promote and protect our interests, not only in North America, but also on the continent of Africa.
Decides not to seek a second term. That statement from Adams' advisor, Evan Thies, says the mayor is 100% focused on.
Yeah, I think that actually there are a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of things, but like Peter says, it seems like we're kind of all divided. Not so much ideologically, but we get divided because we're in these organizations spend a lot of time working one organization. There's an activist realize this. A lot of people doing a lot of things. The United Black Community, and again, like a small number, very few people doing a lot of work on organizations. And actually, this youth brother collective it kind of made me the value of organizations like Black Lives Matter. When you were saying, well, really, this is like a continuation of the civil rights movement, because I wasn't really thinking of it like that. But I think that it is, again, in its own iteration, right? It has to deal with the time and place. And there's not really a mass movement like we had during the time when Malcolm was on the scene, when Martin Luther King was on the scene. There was something, an idea whose time had come. So it was like a whirlwind movement. But we don't have that same energy flowing, but yet they're still able to build on, I would say, the cultural revolution that actually took place. We didn't have the physical revolution of overcoming the system, but what we did have was a cultural revolution. The psychological changes that Peter Bailey and James have been talking about were accomplished with a good part of our population. I would say maybe 30-35% of our people are conscious, whereas before civil rights Malcolm, we were going through this period of assimilation and trying to sleep. Self-hatred was pervasive, like Peter said, calling somebody black. African, yes, that was the worst thing you could call them. And now we're proud of those terms more than any. It's been a major change that is bringing everybody together. Sometimes it has to come, it almost comes from another source. But you have the people who are sincerely working in organizations like the United Black Community, or UNIA, and the Republican Africa, who still exists, and a number of other Black Lives Matter, and a number of other organizations, even the Black elected officials. I tell you, I'm really starting to have a greater respect for Black elected officials when you look at what they have to go through, and especially what many of them are going through now, especially the progressive members, say, of the Democratic Party, people like AOC, people like Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley and Maxine Waters and others who've been out there for us. I'm starting to have a lot of respect because they can sit there with these people who are so foul, so evil, and they can sit in these chambers with them. To me, that takes a lot, because I don't even think I could do it. I don't think I could sit in the same room with some of those people, but they're doing that, knowing that they're dealing with who they're dealing with. But they're doing that. To me, that's a huge sacrifice that they're making to try and make things better for Black people. So it's a lot of us doing a lot of things, but that force that brings it all together, and who knows, this if the Republicans take over the country, which is what they're planning to do, if it really moves into a fascist state, then that would be a force right there, all right, where we would have to do something. I don't know what it might take. Maybe it would take them marching us back off to the plantations in chains, but something is going to wake us up at some point where we will unite, not just in the United States, but all over the world. But of course, they talk about the polarization. When situations become so polarized, this is when you get these revolutionary leaps, right? I think that's what they call it in Marxism, but that is what happens. And that looks like the country is getting to that point now. And when Malcolm said the ballot or the bullet, liberty or death, it can come to that. It is coming to that.
Again,
I'm saying,
go ahead.
I believe that if we got ourselves together as a group of people and begin to do concrete things that these brothers and sisters advocated, instead of just talking about them and having things like that, we start carrying out concrete things that they were saying that we should do. then we would be in a better position that whatever comes from them, way the society is going, we're better position to promote and protect our interests in no matter what goes down. We'll be in a better position to do that if we follow the guide and we follow Brother Malcolm's Pan-Africanist position. We'd be in a much better position if those white supremacists ever decide to make some kind of physical move on us to promote and protect ourselves. But I don't think that's going to happen so much. I think what they are doing with us is they get after us psychologically. And when things start going bad, they do some feel good thing and we just swoon over it. Like this woman being put on the Supreme Court, we just swoon over it. And those kind of things. And I think it's nice that she's there, but that to me is not, we should not consider that no great victory. That's the Democratic Party's way of keeping us connected to them. And the Republicans got their boys. They got the Armstrong Williamses and they got the Clarence Thomases, and to me, these people are so far gone as far as I'm concerned. Those, the Armstrong, we should not waste our times always trying to respond to them. And the best way to respond to them is to get ourselves organized as a group of people. That's how you respond to Clarence Thomas. And eventually one day Clarence Thomas may have to come to us when things start going down and you get those people in charge. Because I tell people in this society, I always make a distinction between the white supremacists and the racists. I always say, the white supremacists don't mind having Black people around as long as white people are in charge. And they will give you little goodies and reward you. And as long as they are in charge, they will be good. The racists don't want Black folks around. And right now, it's the white supremacists who are the dominant factor among white people in this country, not the racists. It's the white supremacists. Donald Trump is the white supremacist. If you accept Donald, if a Black person accepts Donald Trump as the leader, Donald Trump will give you all kind of money. So those, and that's the kind of thing that we got to understand that we put too much emphasis as a people on politics. You will never have political power without economic power. You may have a limited degree of political influence, but you will never have political power without economic power. And if you have economic power, you automatically have political power. And we as a people we spend all of our efforts in electoral politics and civil rights, and we totally ignore economics, almost to the man. You rarely hear major Black leaders from the academic world, from the political world, from the business world, from any of those world, do you hear them talking about serious economics? Serious economics. Why a group of people who spend $1.3 trillion a year give probably $1 trillion of that to other racial and ethnic groups rather than using it among ourselves? That's a problem. And we rarely hear anybody with a national platform talk seriously about economics. We make it sound as though politics, to me, as I said before, will follow economics. You have economic power, you automatically have political power. But you will never have political power without economic power. You will only have maybe a limited degree of political influence. And we need to understand that as a people. And again, that's psychological. We think too many of us will go and spend our money if this ethnic group, whether they're Asian or European or whatever, we will go and give them our economic resources. If they just smile at us, we give them our 75 to 80% of our economic resources, rather than using that to begin to build a strong economic base among ourselves. And does that mean, and I'm not saying we can do this all, of course we can't do it by ourselves. We have to have relationships with other people But you would have a different type of relationship if they know that you know, we're talking about economics, we know just as much about this as you do. We know just as much about this as you do. The Jewish community in this country, prime example, they what, about 6 or 7 million of them, but they have tremendous political power. Why? Because of their economic power. And because also the fact that they're white in most of them. But it's they're having that economic power, which makes people very wary about messing with them. And we've got to understand that, man, and start putting more and in our culture. Economics is a part of culture. There are people, many people in this country who are millionaires who made money on Black culture. And brothers and sisters, again, following Brother Malcolm in psychological warfare. And what you see is going on. Recently, I think most of you probably read about Dolly Parton saying that refusing the induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because she said she's not can you imagine that? You know what the Rock and Roll have done? They have inducted Mahalia Jackson into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've inducted Sam Cooke. They've inducted Marvin Gaye. What are these people doing? These people were not rock and roll singers. And if we don't watch it, brothers and sisters, 20 years from now, it's going to be taught in America that rock and roll is the foundation for jazz, blues, gospel, rhythm and blues, and soul music. If we don't watch it, that's what's going to happen. And again, that's a combination of the psychological and the economic. And I remember reading something recently where Ruth Brown, the great Ruth Brown from the 1950s, someone said to her when she had been nominated to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, "Why are we doing this? We don't need to be here. This is not us." And she said, "Listen, we don't get no recognition nowhere else, so I may as well accept it here." Can you imagine putting Ruth Brown into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Ruth Brown was no rock and roll singer, but they're trying to make rock and roll, and if we don't watch it, rock and roll is going to be the foundation, and out of rock and roll came jazz, blues, soul, gospel, and rhythm and blues. That's the kind of combination of the psychological and the economic that we ignore. And I say, people who understand this, and brothers and sisters, I'm repeating this again, what we need to do is to pull together people who understand these kinds of things and to get together and talk about what we can do to empower ourselves. As I said before, there are groups of Black folks all over this country doing things, but that's not functional in 2022. You got to have an organization that has connection, direct connections abroad with the continent. So to me, we really have to understand and try to help our people to understand. And we can only do this if the true believers organize. And once they get organized, then do outreach to everybody else. We show our people that we organize and we come up with concrete things in those areas I was telling you about: education, economics, culture, etc. And people will say, "Hey, man, that seems to work. I like that." Then they may come and join us, and the movement will be larger.
Yeah, I agree with those categories, Brother Peter. Dr. Jeffries taught us, well, Malcolm really instructed us when he defined Black nationalism. He said it's the control of the economics, politics, and culture where you live. Those three things must be married together. Dr. Leonard Jeffries broke down the purpose of it. Economics is the wealth in your environment, in your ecology. Politics is the management instrument for that wealth. And culture is the ethical, moral training for those who carry out your politics to the distribution of that wealth. And so we need to really make sure we got those three in context and that those three are married to one another. But the other part is, and coming back to Sister Nubia, we have created we have done something no one has done in the history of the world in terms of the number of personage, male and female, we've elected to political office in America in the short period of time that we've done so. What we've failed to do is hold them accountable once we've elected them there. And thus the collaboration and the betrayal has been carried on. And these people just end up having jobs for life, but never deliver the policy to the Black community or carry the Black agenda that should be carried. And so we have a responsibility to hold them responsible. Right now, Gregory Meeks is pushing legislation to sanction African nations that does not oppose the Soviet Union in Ukraine. That's insane. But I'm sure that there are other Blacks in the Black caucus that are going along with Meeks. And this isn't the first time Meeks and others have done this, because he was a part of that legislation that sanctions Zimbabwe for taking their land back from imperialist murderers and oppressors. And so we've got to hold these people accountable. And I'm calling Gregory out. I knew him before he was a Gregory Meeks. Most of these young people who are now elderly people who are in the Congress got there because of our struggle, the Republic of the New Africa, the OAU, the Black Panther Party. We created a struggle in the 60s and 70s that opened those opportunities and possibilities. We did fight to get people to vote, and we did deliver. We put our people in the offices, but they have to deliver to the people who put them there. And so holding them responsible is a big part of what we need to get in place, because we have not held them responsible for the purpose we sent them to Washington, to carry a Black agenda and to represent our interests. So because I believe that all politics is local, that Blacks should control the school board where they live, the land reform committee where they live, who to pick up the garbage where they live, who's the city council where they live. That means we must master local political instruments, but that's only one element. As Peter was saying, are people who are spending I think Peter, this last year was $1.6 trillion. And we're giving it away while crying impoverishment. There's no reason, even if we're 80 million people, they say 40 something, and then they say they didn't count 1/3 of us. So I'm saying 80 million people, $1.6 trillion, we shouldn't have a single unemployment in our community. But we don't have a political system to manage our economic system. And because we haven't married the three. And I think a part of such a conference that Peter is talking about, where we get specialists in the economic sector, specialists in the political sector, those organizations who has proven their specialization, like I would say the Republic of New Africa in the South, prove they can control that political sector. When you could elect people down there in Mississippi too, that make South Africa look pale in terms of a terrorist state. So there's certain organizations who have proven their skills that we know how to do this piece. And there are others who have proven we know how to do this piece. And so we do need such a conference that Peter's talking about. But we must remember the three elements must be married. We can't separate those three elements. They must be married to one another. And then the last piece is that the family have to be the core of reconstructing our community. Has to be the family. And we need to relook the damage done to the Black family structure over the last 30, 40 years. And how can we revitalize that using our culture? Because culture isn't just dancing and music and movies. Those are tools of culture. Culture is the ideas that they're trying to teach. What are the principles? What are the concepts? What are the ideas of how to work in harmony together despite having contradictions? How to then know what contradictions to resolve and what to set aside and come back to and resolve later. Those are the kinds of affairs that culture takes care of for you. And so we can instruct our politics petitions how to behave in our interests so that we can manage our economy, begin to open banks again in our community, open credit unions in our community. When I pick up the phone and call for someone to do some plumbing work, I don't want it to be an Eastern European, but that's what I get now. I get anybody but an African American. What happened to Booker T. Washington? Our left-wing liberal friends made us store him in the garbage can for their Marxist concepts and ideas, and then even made us pit Mr. Garvey against Mr. Booker, when Mr. Garvey and Booker was the best of friends. They were brothers. Matter of fact, Mr. Booker invited Mr. Garvey to come to America with his ideas and programs and told him he couldn't come to Tuskegee because he wouldn't survive there. But Booker was murdered, I contend, before Garvey got here. You know, in that meeting, he came to New York, he was poisoned. He never recovered after that dinner. He went in the hospital. He died on a train in Baltimore, the station in Baltimore, on the way back to Tuskegee when his wife Aiden came. And we haven't even investigated what happened to him because our enemy told us he was wrong. Yet if we look at what Malcolm called Black nationalism, Booker T. Washington come the closest of all the leaders of the 1900s. But the point is, I'm trying to make is that the economic, politics, and culture must be married to one another. And we need to do exactly what Peter's saying. Get the organizations that's best in each of the 8 or 9 or 10 categories that we talk about. And let's sit down. Let's come up with a document that we begin to implement. And I think that's doable. You know, they're talking about redoing the National Black Political Convention, but it shouldn't be a redo of what happened back in 70, what was that, 70, 72? No, I went to California that year and I missed the convention in 71. So we've got to have a meeting that comes up with a new perspective where we know that, and Peter, I went over just last week the aims and objective of the OAU, that you were one of the persons with Dr. Clark and others that put together with Brother Malcolm. And everything you're mentioning, those are the aims and objectives of the OAAU.
Yes,
so very on point all those many years ago. And we still need to take that same approach today.
Well, I just wish, like I said before, man, that we would get together, people who share a belief about certain things that we've been talking about, you know, you, Nubia. These are concrete things, man. Brother Malcolm was not, you know, just talking rhetoric. That brother had some concrete proposals. And quite as just know, Dr. King had some concrete proposals that were very, very sharp, and that would fit in right with some of the things we're talking about doing. You know? And so we need to pull together people who truly believe in what, maybe list some of the things that Brother Malcolm advocated, concrete things he advocated, some of the concrete group things that Dr. Luther King out there say, if you believe in these things, please come to this gathering. If you don't believe, if you're wondering about it, please stay home. Because we're not gonna try to educate you about them. We're gonna discuss what we're gonna do, but carry them out. We're not here to, you know, for folks who need to be persuaded. You know, are you writing people off? No, I'm just saying that the people who have to be persuaded, you deal with them later. There's never been a successful organization in the history of man that was started by people who you had to spend 70% of your time persuading. You first get the true believers together, and I know I'm repeating myself. You get the true believers in certain concepts together, and then you get it organized, set up, concrete things, and once you get it moving, then you start doing things and asking other people to come in and see if they find that interesting. But if they don't, then they go on back home. But we're not going to be dependent on, oh, if they don't show, this is not going to happen. No, we're not going to be dependent on that. Because I think there are enough true believers among Black people in this country to create a serious organization to promote and protect our interests here in North America, and also to assist our African brothers and sisters in doing the same thing on the continent.
Yeah, bro. Asante Sana Babas. We're gonna have one more question, Babas and Mama. One more question, Baba and Mamu. I see your hand is up. I'm gonna let you go ahead and take that question or comment. I'm not sure if it's a question or comment. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. Sounds like you might be a little digitized. We actually have one question in the chat, so we'll read that one after you're done.
Okay.
You go ahead. Go ahead, Baba.
Okay. I thought you was dealing with something.
You sound real digital, Baba. We can't. You sound real digital, like it's real bad.
I don't know. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just forego if you can't understand what I'm saying.
Go ahead and try, Bob, but we'll see if we can try to understand it.
But this one question: how can we get a copy of the OAAU? I thought that was one of the best things. One of the great things that Malcolm did was to organize and institutionalize different ideas. So I've been trying to get a copy of that charter of the OAAU for years. So does anyone have a copy to send it to us via UBC?
Yeah, but I think I understood what Bob was saying. He said he basically he was saying he wanted to get a copy of the charter of OAAU and trying to get his hands on it for years. If anybody has anyone on has a copy of that charter, he would like to have it for his archives. They can send it to UBC's email address, ubc@gmail.com, or get it to him any other way. But he's trying to get a copy of the charter for the OAAU. Is that right, Bob?
Yes.
Well, I'll speak to Brother Rodnell Collins, who is our president at this point, and a decision will be made by those persons he holds as board and advisors, and then I'll get back to you.
Okay.
And we have a question out in the chat. Do you think we need to also hold African business owners responsible to hire their own as well?
Absolutely. See, one of the things, when we talk about economics and you talk about money circulating in a community, you can't circulate money in your community if you're paying salary to people who don't live there, don't invest there, and don't support economically there. That doesn't make any sense. If you look at the successful communities in Asia and in the European Jewish sector, for the most part, the people who get the salaries to run those businesses in those communities are their people. And that money gets circulated in their community. The real estate is owned by them, the retailers are owned by them, the wholesalers are run by them, the people driving the trucks are their people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to start being sensible about our identity. And Dr. Asa Hilliard say that true freedom is to be shackled to your identity, to be shackled to that identity. We are African peoples. And even that term Afro-American wasn't something new for Malcolm, nor was it new from somebody in Africa mentioning it. 1892, T. Thomas Fortune and a group of Black women from near Buffalo, New York, founded the Afro-American League. That term was being used. Then Negro didn't come into our lexicon until the 20th century as being used as the primary label by us, and that came under duress and psychological and political warfare. So we have to understand, Malcolm, that history is best to reward all research, and history will certainly erase the enemy's mystery from your mind and allow you to go to the kind of transformation that he went through as a being so that he could carry out the political work and the economic work and the cultural work that must be done for the future.
Brother Peter, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, bro.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to say that the things that I really hope that our people will understand. Some people don't understand, too many of our people, the importance of the teaching of history. And I hope that one of the things they learn and they understand from Brother Malcolm is that he understood that the teaching of history is a part of psychological warfare. And so we have to be very concerned about that and be very aware of what our children are being taught. And my position is that we have to be prepared to teach our children ourselves, our history. It is a waste of time for us to spend all kinds of money and effort trying to get the public school system to teach our history. What we do is we make sure they're not teaching any anti-Black or anti-African stuff, but then we teach our history ourselves, because they're not going to do it. They don't even do it among themselves. The British, when I went to Catholic schools in grades 1 through 8, taught by white nuns down there in Alabama. And those were Irish Catholic nuns. And basically we were taught to be Black Irish Catholic nationalists. And we didn't celebrate a single Black thing, but we all wore green on St. Patrick's Day. And we always did a program at this school on St. Patrick's Day. That's psychological warfare. And those same nuns taught us that Queen Elizabeth I of England they called her everything but a hoe. And then I go to high school at 9th grade to a public high school, and I'm taught that Queen Elizabeth I was one of the greatest women in the history of European people. So you see how important the teaching of history is as a part of the mind, and waking up the mind and keeping the mind. And we need to understand that, it is our job, and we are the only ones who are going to teach our children our history. And the thing about Brother Malcolm, and this is when I talk to him to young people, students that I've taught when I was teaching and that I still sometimes talk to, I would say to them that Brother Malcolm was a great human being, a great Black man, a great Pan-Africanist, and a master teacher. That's the way I describe him to them. And we can learn something. And he was not, again, some kind of rhetorical pie in the sky type person. He was here I wrote a column, our most recent column that I think is in this week's Washington Informer newspaper, is right around his birthday. Brother Malcolm X, a real deal soul brother. That's what I call him, a real deal soul brother. And I got the concept because I read a quote by Frederick Douglass which he supposedly said when he was talking about Martin A. Delaney. And by the way, folks, I was at the thing at the Shabazz Center Thursday night, and I was talking about some of the things I've been talking about. And I asked how many people, about 100 people in the room, knew who Martin Delaney was. And maybe about 7, 8 people raised their hands. Most of those people, and these were not no teenagers. Most of the people there were in their late 30s and 40s. They did not know who Martin Delaney was. And I told them that Frederick Douglass is quoted as saying that, I thank God I was born a man. Martin thanks God he was born a Black man. And now somebody like that who said something like that, or who Frederick Douglass described as being like that, I'll choose to, and I'll bet you that 99% of our children in this, you have the slightest idea who Martin Delaney was. And this is the brother who was one of the founders of what we now call Black nationalism. He went to Africa. He was a Pan-Africanist before that term was even used. And he also, when the Union Army decided that they needed Black troops, he was a major recruiter and got a lot of Black soldiers to join the Union Army. And they ended up being the difference between winning and losing for the North. In fact, most people don't know that on April the 3rd, 1865, the first Union soldiers to enter Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy, were Black Union soldiers. Nobody taught us that. That's history. It's psychological. And so Brother Malcolm, man, the brother understood this. He talked about it regularly and consistently, as well as things about economics and politics and those kind of things. But Brother Malcolm understood that you have to beware and be aware of how successful these people have been in attacks on the minds of Black people in North America, and unfortunately, almost equally successful in the attacks on the mind of our brothers and sisters on the continent.
Yeah, I was going to say about African accountability. And sometimes I hear people saying, you know, especially in Washington, D.C., well, yeah, the Ethiopians, you know, they've taken over all the businesses, you know, they've taken over all the restaurants, da, da, da. But to me, I don't know, for me, Black is Black. And it doesn't matter where you come from, kind of like what Peter Tosh says, and no matter where you come from, as long as you're Black, you're African. So when I hear people say things like that, and it's like, well, wait a minute, would you say that if they were an African American, like you, born here and raised here? And of course, it was like, well, no. So, but what's the difference? Because he's Black, just like you know. To me, that's really having the true Pan-African spirit, because I'm looking at a lot of the money, they hire their people because a lot of the people that are there working in their stores may not have their papers, and then may not be able to get jobs other places. And people, of course, are going to hire their relatives and friends from their own countries. But I look at the money is actually probably going to a better place, because, as you know, most of the money that we spend goes out of our community into the white community. But at least the money that the Ethiopians and other African groups are getting, that's going to Africa. A lot of the businesses, and some of them are small businesses right here in Washington, D.C. You can go to Addis Ababa, and a lot of the people actually own these businesses over in Addis Ababa who are based right here in Washington, D.C. But one of the things you see in Ethiopia, which you don't see in a lot of in many other countries, is that they own most of their businesses. 95% of their businesses are owned by Ethiopians. So for me, okay, this money is going to help Black people, because here it's going right back into the white community some kind of way. You know, so yeah, I think they should be held accountable in a sense. But I mean, I wouldn't sweat them about, okay, you need to give such and such money because nobody else does it. And I mean, even African Americans who have businesses don't give as much as they should back to the community. You know, so I just have always had a different feeling about that. And you do hear that complaints, but you don't want to descend into tribalism, you know, and that's a problem that, you know, I've heard some people who have with this organization, ADOS, but that's talking about Black unity. But when they talk about it, they're only talking about the United States. They're not talking about Africans in the Caribbean. They're not talking about Africans on the continent. And then you have the continent, because really there's more of a Pan-African consciousness in the diaspora, particularly among people in the Caribbean. I would say they're the main people who, to me, brought us all together. Maybe it's because of the geopolitical situation with them, right? These islands, scattered islands that are in between these two large masses. So they're the ones that's trying to bring us all together. Because really some of the great Pan-Africans have come out of there. But even in Africa, when they talk about Pan-Africanism, they're often talking about just Africa, all right? Which has not even been designated by them, because Africa also included Iraq, and by the ancient African historians, Saudi Arabia, Babylon, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, that was also all of Africa. It was considered the same mass. So now they're saying, okay, this is Africa, but African people only exist here. They don't really consider us Africans. But I'm still saying somebody has to take the higher ground. So no matter where you come from, as long as you're Black, you're African. And for you having a business, I have no problem with you having a business. And I'm not even going to go to another brother, even from the States business, before I would go to an Ethiopian, a Nigerian, or other, because it really doesn't make any difference for me.
The wonderful thing would be if our Ethiopian brother, Nigerian brother held your sentiments. And that's where the discussion has to be. Okay, that's where the discussion has to be, because even in Washington, D.C., where you have an Office of African Affairs in the mayor's office, they have such an office to assist the African immigrants. But the most impoverished element of the community is the African-American community, and they don't have such an office. One would say, well, the mayor is African-American, but the mayor is Geo-American politics. They're not carrying an African-American agenda into the mayoralty. And so the discussion that the Pan-Africans have to have is, how do we have a discussion on what Pan-Africanism really means in terms of building the supportive relationship between us, no matter where we come from in the African world. And the ADOS and the foundational Black American, those are new phenomena. African Americans have always been in the forefront of being the Pan-African articulators. And we still are, because the ADOS people, I don't think they had a conference. I didn't go, I sent some people. They can't count 2,000 in their numbers with all of the tweeting they've been doing. And I'm sure Tariq Nasheed and the instrument he's trying to put together with Foundation, it'll have the same failure, because Africa is what we are. Africans is what we are. And though we have been shattered by oppression in all kinds of ways all over the world, part of our discussion has to be, how do we experience the oneness economically, politically, and culturally? And it'll come if we're deliberate about that discussion, coming from all the different directions we come from. And you find some of this happening. I know Ethiopian brothers who are revolutionary comrades and better Pan-Africanists than the boys, and the same with Nigerians, even though I know others who may be collaborators with the British. So we know the Pan-Africanists in all of our communities. And we have to do like Peter said, let's try and extract those people to come together from all those communities so we can have the dialogue and begin to implement the kinds of things that will stop us from fighting one another in the ways we're doing economically, politically, and culturally, and find the kind of unity and assistance that would allow us to take the wealth we have, which is one of the wealthiest peoples in the world. We're like, in North America, we're the 4th or 5th largest African nation in the world, Brazil being the first, Nigeria being the first, Brazil the second, Colombia the third, and I think it's Kenya that may be the 4th, and we would be the 5th largest African nation in the world. But in terms of GNP, we're the wealthiest. We have more money to spend than the Black Brazilian, than the Black Colombian, than the Black Nigerian, than the Kenyans, in terms of the individual spending power. But because of our ignorance of how to design a community around economic, political, and culture, we're allowing most of that wealth to be extracted out without us being able to use it to build institutions that would safeguard our women and children and our families. And that's a discussion we've got to have over and over till we get it.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Peter, you're muted. Brother Peter, you're muted.
Okay, I said I support Africans who are Pan-Africanists, just like I support African Americans who are Pan-Africanists. I'm not going to support you if you're Ethiopian or Nigerian and you're not a Pan-Africanist. Then I'm not going to support you. I don't support a Nigerian I support a Pan-Africanist Nigerian, a Pan-Africanist Ethiopian, a Pan-Africanist Ghanaian. I was at a conference in Ghana in 2018, and they had Pan-Africanist people there from all over the world. 40 countries were represented there, including Argentina in South America. And my position is that I only support Pan-Africanists. And until Africa, the continent itself, developed the Pan-Africanist concept for the continent, we're going to get screwed. I always bring up this, brothers and sisters. In 2009, the Washington Post, which is one of the most powerful newspapers in America, did an 8-page supplement. 8-page supplement. The headline for that supplement was Africa on the agenda, not Africa's agenda. Africa on the agenda. You know what the subhead was? Africa, the key to global economic growth. Now this, I still have that supplement from the Washington Post. And I tell my African friends that with that in mind, these people are telling you straight up. So if you're still following this, I'm a Nigerian, I'm an Ethiopian, I'm an Igbo. If you're still doing that, as far as I'm concerned, you are playing a key role in holding down the continent of Africa. And we got to start, again, like we got to start telling ourselves the truth. We got to start telling our brothers and sisters on the continent the real deal. When these people see you walking down the streets in America, these white folks, they don't say, oh, he's Ethiopian, he's Nigerian. They say he's black. And then they may meet you and find out what you are. But they say he's black. You know, and so I don't accept this kind of, you know, the Ethiopians who regard themselves as foremost as Ethiopians and nothing else, or the Nigerians who regard themselves as Nigerians, or the people who regard themselves as Igbos, and all those kind of things, divisive things. As far as I'm concerned, you are basically an ally of the folks who are colonizing Africa. And I wrote a column recently when I read that after the pandemic, the students from international abroad have been coming to this country in large numbers. And the numbers, the ones with the highest number coming into America were China, India, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And I said in my column, and they were all going to the quote unquote Ivy League institutions, you know, the Harvards, the Yales, Princeton, those kind of places. And I wrote in my column, I said, I hope those Nigerian students understand that the job of those institutions of Harvard, yeah, they are to educate white people to maintain white domination of world affairs. That's the job of Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and all those things. And to educate Africans to assist them in doing so. So, and this is my position. This is my position now. If you're African and you said, I'm Nigerian, I met a young brother about 10 years ago almost now. I was vending in DC. I was vending at an Africa Day thing they were having there, and I had a table with books on it and everything. And a friend of mine, she was supposed to be there to help me out, but she left and couldn't come back. And so I had to go to the bathroom. So I was trying to see somebody come to my table that I might be able to say, you know, could you watch my stuff for a couple minutes while I went across the street to the bathroom? This young brother from Nigeria came. I didn't know he was from Nigeria. I knew he was African, but I know he was from Nigeria. And he looked at so finally I said, hey, brother, could you do me a favor? I got to run across to the bathroom. Could you watch my table until I come back? So he said, okay. I went, I came back. We talked for about 20 minutes. I said, by the way, what is your name? He said, my name is Frank. I said, man, I'm telling you right now, I am not calling you Frank. I am not calling you Frank. Now, I just met him. I said, what is your African name? He said, Owolayi. I said, well, I'll call you Layi for short. And to this day, he's been back to Nigeria and he's back here again right now. He tells me that's when he goes around this country now, that's what he gives us his name. But he was told when he left Nigeria, you better call yourself, you know, an anglicized name if you want to get anywhere. So he called himself Frank. I said, I'm not calling you Frank. And that's what we're up against. And we're up against it on the continent, and we're up against something similar here. And that's why I say that to me, the most important identity, and I'm currently working on a book called Brother Malcolm's Strategic Pan-Africanism. And the subtitle is An Important Guide for People of African Descent. And I'm talking solely about what Brother Malcolm was doing internationally. That's what this book is going to focus on, solely what he was doing internationally. And because he was a strong Pan-Africanist, because he understood that the fate of Black people is totally connected. Totally connected. And if we don't understand that, then we are at least partially responsible. How can you be the key to global economic growth and be having some of the problems that the continent is having today? This is what the Washington Post called you, the key to global economic growth. the African continent. And yet we having all the problems we're having today because we don't have that Pan-Africanist ideology. We think Africa got 50 states, what the Europeans have and the Americans have learned. So if you get 10 people on 1 acre of land, they'll call themselves the Republic or whatever. They'll have ambassadors from Paris, Moscow, London, Washington, and Peking the next day. Because they want to see all these little tiny countries on the continent. That's what they want to see. And that's what is going on now. And we got to start talking reality to our African friends and not just, just kind of suing up to them. I don't do that anymore. I talk to them the same way I talk to African. If you are not a Pan-Africanist, then you're helping to maintain to keep Africa under the control, the economic control of people over it, because that's what that thing said. Africa on the agenda, headline, Africa, the key to global economic growth, subhead. I don't know what they have to do more than that. It would seem as though anybody with a half a sense of consciousness would see that supplement and say, man, we got to get together.
Well, Brother Peter, a lot of what you're saying is going on the continent. I do a lot of work with a platform called Pan-African Daily TV with Sister Susan Tata out of Cameroon, and she's based in Germany. But we have about another 45 platforms that work with us in trying to articulate history and the Pan-African concept. And in Ghana, as you know, that me and another one of my organizations, we own a business in Ghana and a significant amount of land in Ghana that we are trying to marry Africans with capital from here with developmental projects there on the continent. And I would say most of our allies are Pan-Africanists.
Okay, well, that's good then. That's good.
Yeah, so you see this happening. It's not at the universality we want to see it, but we see it happening. Like one of the young brothers, I call them young brothers, because I think I got him by a few years. He's the king of a region called Esukado in the western region of Ghana. But he's also a PhD professor at the University of Cape Coast. Now, he had to cut back on his teaching to assume his role as the monarch. But his uncle's best friend was John Henry Clark. And his home was the home in which Maya Angelou lived while she was in Ghana. And so there's a whole Pan-African sprouting coming out of that region. This was in Nkrumah's main base, right? Down the road, really, from Nkrumah's village and hometown. And so, but you find that all over the continent. There's struggles going on with the brothers I'm working with in Nigeria on the same questions we are discussing now. The question of Pan-Africanism, the question of, putting ethnicity in context. But we know the enemy is fighting us because the people who are giving the guns and the money to Boko Haram and the other terrorist groups are the French, the Americans, and the British. And so we're trying to counter that, because I've been very steep in what's been going on in Nigeria in the last 4 or 5 years. We're at war, both at the physical level, the psychological level, the cultural level, and the economic level. And that's why what you're saying, such a meeting that you're talking about must happen, so we can marry those 5 elements and come up with the kinds of working proposal that we can then give people to be implemented. But I don't think it's as dreary as we sometimes make it think, because every day I'm on the horn and on these talks with people from all over the African continent. And there's some young people that's putting up a fight, from South Africa to Mali, from Senegal to Kenya, from Congo, and it's high in Congo, and Angola is a hard nut. But I'm able to talk to Congo and talk to Angola and have young people translating while I'm doing these talks. I've learned to talk slowly so that they can get the translations, and they're having the same discussion we're having. They're having these discussions at home. And I think we just have to bond with different ones and pull ourselves closer together so we can have a greater impact.
I'm glad to hear that.
Hey, boy, and let me add, there's one of the places in the world right now where you're getting actual new chapters of United ACL is on the continent.
Yeah.
Especially Nigeria, as Baba said. So, and there are Pan-African conferences that go on the continent all the time, especially around universities like Sheikh Anta Diop, and University of Ghana and Accra. Their conferences are constantly going on. So it is a growing movement. It's definitely not the pervasive thought on the continent, because we know that most people are come up from essentially the same colonial education that was put there 100 years ago. But there is definitely a growing Pan-African movement, and we need to obviously encourage it and find a way to have more bridges and networks across the Atlantic, so that the growth can be more exponential, I should say. But there's definitely that growth, there's that fervor. People are rejecting, not just rejecting the sense of colonial rule, but they're actually rejecting white supremacy. And not so long ago, it was very common to hear about shrines being destroyed, both in Ghana and in Nigeria and other, in Benin, places like that. You're not hearing that anymore. I'm not saying it's not happening at all, but it's definitely not happening as much. In places like Benin, they are recapturing a lot of that lost territory.
Right. But let me, if you would mind me interrupting for a minute, is that I wholly agree with Peter that the prefix to our national identity should be Pan-African. I'm a Pan-African African American.
That's right.
I'm a Pan-African.
That's right.
I think that prefix will shed a light on how we view ourselves when we introduce ourselves as an group.
People should say, I'm a Pan-African Nigerian. What's your name, brother? Oh, I'm a Pan-African Ethiopian. I'm a Pan-African African American. I'm a Pan-African Ghanaian. I'm a Pan-African Kenyan. I think that, man, that's words. Brother Malcolm understood the importance of words, man. He taught me words. Very important. And we have to understand that. And we have to understand those both on the continent and here in North America. And I really think we should start using, when we talk about this, we should always start referring to it as North America, and maybe in parentheses as USA, because this is a continent. This is not a country. And I think that's something I tell my African colleagues. You have to understand, when you deal with this, you're dealing with the continent of North America. And only the continent of Africa can negotiate effectively with the continent of North America. And though the Europeans are not yet continental in terms of together, but when it comes to dealing with Africa, the Europeans are continental, including the Russians. Because I know African students who told me about some of the things they experienced in Moscow from white supremacists when they were as students in Moscow. So the Europeans, though they are not united like the United States, they still have, when it comes to dealing with Africa, they have a united belief. And so do, and I'll be very frank with you, so do the Chinese.
Oh, absolutely.
So do the Chinese. The Chinese look upon them, they're looking out for China. They're smarter and slicker than the Europeans and the North Americans are, but they're looking out for China. And the Africans had better be aware of that and not thinking they're some kind of great buddies. And no African country can negotiate with China. China got 1 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
How you got 10 million people and you're gonna talk about you're gonna negotiate with China? No, you can't. Only the continent of Africa can negotiate with the subcontinent of China. Can no individual African country negotiate anything with China? Or North America? Or Europe? Only the continent of Africa can negotiate with those entities. And brothers, I'm gonna have to get ready to move on because my time is my fingers getting very low.
Yeah, bro. And we're done. We just wanted to let you all riff as much as you wanted, but we definitely let me call Baba Rasafiq to come in and close us out. We definitely appreciate each of you and what you shared. I know we've gone later, and we appreciate the audience. I don't think we've lost anybody. folks have also stuck around. You know, maybe went in and out, but they're still with us. Barbara Rasafiq, can you join? Hopefully I see you're on, but I don't know if you're actually close, so we can close this out. Bobby Mamu. Since Barbara Rasafiq isn't there, perhaps you can help us close out the program. And before I hand it over, I definitely want to thank Brother Peter Bailey, Professor Small, Dr. Nubia for answering the call. Really appreciate everything that you share with the community in general, all the work that you do, all the product that you do to really bring us together as a people, to uplift us and to empower us, and of course to connect us to the spirit of Brother Malcolm. Let me pass the mic.
I'm here, Baba.
Okay, there you are. I thought maybe you might have stepped away. Where you at?
I've been listening. It's been very, very powerful, but we're moving around.
Gotcha. Can you maybe close us out?
You want to close out? Yeah, we've sort of off and on been listening to this powerful discussion. We want to thank all three speakers, Mama Nubia, Baba Peter, and Baba James Small. We've really been given a wealth of information, insight into the situation on the continent. Because one question we had was, how strong is the OAU, the Organization of African Unity? Is it still together? Is it still functioning?
Do you think I will answer that for you? You can have a private conversation with me on it.
Private conversation. Okay. that tells me a lot. Absolutely. So okay, we'll talk later about that. But Santi Sana, thank you so much. We appreciate you being on board, and we've got to go back and listen to this. We recorded this, didn't we, Baba?
Yeah, bro. It's recorded. It's also on our YouTube.
YouTube. Okay,
well,
excellent.
And on our Facebook page.
Do you want to say something, Mama? Teresa?
Yeah, don't forget next month's forum, Baba Kalashi.
Yeah, bro. I'm gonna let you speak on it after Bob Rasafiq is finished.
Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks so much, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Baba James Small and Mama Nubia. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I'll be back to DC on Monday morning.
Okay, Peter. have a safe trip back, man.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Bobby Mamu, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to invite the community to join us again next month on Friday, June the 17th, as we continue our call to action forums. Next month, we'll be dealing with health. We're talking about what is killing us in the Black community. There are 10 leading causes of death among our people. And we're going to talk about what is actually killing us and what can we do about it. You know, are we languishing in health and or the lack thereof? So we'll have health practitioners and many people who've done work in the area of health presenting. And we would like to, for your participation and your input as well. And we also plan to have a little publication that we will be presenting to the community about some of our findings as far as what is killing us and what can and what we should do about it. So join us on next month, June 17th, pass the word. J-Bo.
Asante Sana, Baba. And thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you were enlightened, uplifted, inspired, literally inspired with the spirit of Brother Malcolm. I think there's a lot wealth of information that was shared. I know if you missed some of it, there's a lot of it, a lot of information, a lot to really digest.
Yes.
You can revisit it on our YouTube channel. Just search United Black Community, or our Facebook page is on there as well. And we will also probably send out a link to the video to the folks on our mailing list. So if you are not on our mailing list, well, you register. So hopefully you should be on the mailing list. You'll get a link to the video as well. So thank you all for joining us, and everyone have a good weekend. Faraha Kuzaliwa.
Faraha Kuzaliwa. Yeah, bro.
Can we do a Harambe, some Harambe's Bible? Can you do that for us?
Yeah, man. Harambe. 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 Last one, y'all. Harambe. Yeah, let's all pull together.
Yeah, bro.
In the spirit of Brother Malcolm.
And we'll close out with the music. We played them in the interlude. We had a little bit of time to fill. We're gonna play it again. Malcolm X Dancers and Drummers. Everyone have a good weekend. Rest of the weekend.
Yeah, bro. Right. You can't hear that well on music, especially drumming and dancing, is not good on Zoom. It doesn't, you don't have that continuity in sound.